Hello and welcome back to this damn fully dualistic crusade. In this video I'm going to be going over titles that are available in the Kino Lorber summer sale, which is also celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Studio Classics division, and as usual is the best time to stock up on Kino titles. However, Kino releases vary in quality wildly at times, and you do have to sift through the list of titles that are included in order to try and stretch your dollar as much as it's going to go in terms of what I always look for is trying to focus on the titles that have newer masters, whether they're 2K or 4K masters, or even 4K UHD releases, but also the titles that have more of a supplemental features package, as most Kino releases really don't have one, or at the most have just a trailer gallery. So I do think it's worthwhile to sort of scrutinize the various releases and try to, again, make your dollar go as much as possible and try to focus on titles with the better masters or a better encoding or more supplements or the UHD titles as well. But you also have to keep in mind certain titles have been released by other labels in other countries. Usually those can actually be technically superior or have superior extras or both. So you do have to keep in mind if you are trying to have the best release of a film, that you will have to pick up other label editions of some films, again, if you're trying to have the best overall release and not double dip on a bunch of different titles. So basically what I decided to do is to go through the list like I usually do, but sort of give my own rationale for titles that I think are important or are at a significant savings, because the actual sale pricing does vary on titles. Most are around $9.99, some are a little bit less, and then the UHD titles are usually about $17.99, but there are some titles mixed in that are substantially cheaper, and I do think some of those are important, so I'll try to highlight those as we go along. And then if there's certain titles that I think have a better edition from another label or a particular technical issue, I will highlight that as well. So starting alphabetically, we have the classic 12 Angry Men on the UHD release. Now, this is the newest and technically best presentation of the film, and it does have some supplements, but you do have to have the Criterion Blu-ray for all of the Criterion-specific supplements. This release does have a new audio commentary, plus some of the older MGM legacy features, but the big draw is that they included a standalone Blu-ray release of the William Friedkin remake of the film from 1997. So you're technically getting two separate films, and if you hadn't already gotten the standalone Kino Blu-ray of the remake, you actually get it bundled in with this UHD release. I've not gotten to review this disc yet, so I don't know the status of the film's audio track or what the encoding of the UHD is like, but this is the technically best presentation of the film now. But do keep in mind, if you want all of the supplements, you also need to have the Criterion release. Next is the 1968 Italian Western Ace High with Eli Wallach. This is a newer Paramount scan, plus it has a new commentary, and it still has the slipcover, which those usually don't stick around on Kino releases. So if you're into slipcovers, you'll want to note that there are titles here in the sale that still have them, because once that first batch or print run sells out, Kino does not reprint slipcovers. And for my own personal recommendation, if you were to buy any one title in this sale, it should be The Adventures of Captain Marvel, which is only $9.99 and is the newer Paramount master of the first official comic book adaptation in film form, and remains arguably the greatest adventure serial ever made, and is one of the greatest action films ever made. Unfortunately, Kino has said they are not going to release serials anymore because the 2 or 3 that they didn't have the greatest of sales, which is unfortunate because the serial is an art form and should be respected as such if people had better access to high quality versions. And Captain Marvel is a great place to start, because the case can be made that it is the best of all serials, or at least going shoulder to shoulder with the original Flash Gordon serial. But it was also directed by the legendary team of William Whitney and John English, really at the peak of the serial form at Republic, which was the best of the studios producing serials. And these are the cliffhanger action serials that inspired everything in terms of action cinema. Particularly without William Whitney, who I think is the father of the modern action sequence, we simply would not have the action film. And if you want to see where comic book films really started, it's Adventures of Captain Marvel, which remains one of the great comic book films. Unfortunately, though, while this is a newer Paramount master and of much higher quality than what's come before, it's still riddled with damage throughout. It wasn't a full frame-by-frame restoration or anything meticulous, but at least it is the highest quality we've had. But there is a technical problem in one of the chapters, and I'm going to do a review of this particular release, but unfortunately one of the 12 chapters does have a slight frame rate problem that causes it to duplicate frames, so that chapter runs a little bit longer. But otherwise, it is far beyond what we had on DVD and Laserdisc, and it does also include some commentaries on some of the chapters, so it does have supplemental features. And in terms of runtime, you are looking at a 12-chapter serial, so you've got hours and hours of material to enjoy, and it really is a masterwork of the form and a work of art. And if you've never seen a serial, you can't go wrong with starting with what is arguably the pinnacle of the form, The Adventures of Captain Marvel. Then we have 1954's Alaska Seas, which is from the same director and studio behind Secret of the Incas, which also was released in 1954. So this is another period color adventure film starring, this time, Robert Ryan, but in the same sort of mold as Secret of the Incas, and this is also a brand new Paramount master with a new commentary, so you get both new master and at least a commentary track for an obscure film that really fits right in with Secret of the Incas. Next is Apache with Burt Lancaster. This is a Robert Aldrich directed Western, which automatically makes it extraordinarily important because Aldrich is one of the great directors of Westerns, in addition to all of his other classic films. But unfortunately, this is not a new master, nor does it have really any extras outside of the trailer, but this was a very important film earlier on for both Burt Lancaster and Robert Aldrich, who would, of course, pair together on one of the greatest of all Westerns, Vera Cruz, along with Gary Cooper. Aldrich was no stranger to the Western and returned many times, but this is just one of those titles that I feel is rather important in people's careers, and so I just wanted to mention it, even though it's a title without a newer transfer or really a supplemental package. Next, of course, is the UHD of the masterpiece The Apartment, one of the greatest films ever made, Billy Wilder's absolute masterpiece and arguably the best Wilder film. It's hard to choose just one, but The Apartment is perhaps the film that most personifies and defines what a Wilder film experience is. This is the newest and technically best master, a 4K master from MGM. It does have a few extras, but basically it's a new commentary that's exclusive to this release. But if you want all of the wonderful supplements that exist for the film, you really do need to pick up the previous Arrow Blu-ray from the UK. But the other thing to note is that while this does have the original mono track of the film, and it was sourced from the Laserdisc release, which has the best mono we know to exist, unfortunately it has been processed some, so it does not actually sound as good as the source track is. So basically they got the Laserdisc capture from someone and synced it to this release, but processed it for some reason so it no longer sounds as good as the actual Laserdisc. So you will need to actually pair this release with the MGM Letterbox Laserdisc release, which has the untouched PCM mono track, which again is the best fidelity audio that we know to exist of the original mix. And the Kino disc has basically a filtered and processed version of the Laserdisc mono track. Then we have 1965's The Art of Love. That was directed by the late, great Norman Jewison. This is earlier in his film career when he wound up doing a couple of star vehicle romantic comedies just before his string of classics really started with The Russians Are Coming, The Russians Are Coming, and of course, most famously, In the Heat of the Night, followed by The Thomas Crown Affair. But it's fascinating looking at these earlier films because I think you can see at least some of his style coming into play. And in this film, on this Blu-ray release, you have a new 2K master and a new commentary plus the trailer, so that's another thing I always look for, again, if you've got new masters and commentaries and such, to sweeten the deal and make it a more attractive release than your usual standard Kino disc of just an old master without any supplements. Next is the spiffed up special edition of the classic horror film The Asphyx, which has a slipcover and a lovely special edition with some new features as compared to the now previous out-of-print version that I had always meant to pick up. So this is one of the ones that I'm really looking to pick up. This is one of those films that I've seen pieces of over the years and always wanted to see the whole thing. And the past Blu-ray was on my wish list, but I just never got around to picking it up. And so now this newer version that Kino has put out is available with a new commentary. And again, I would suppose a spiffed up presentation plus new artwork and a slipcover if you're interested in those. Next is the Robert Aldrich directed war film Attack with Jack Palance. Again, this is another standard film-only release with just the trailer, but I do think Aldrich is one of the great and undervalued American directors, so I do think all of his films are worth your time, even if they're just a standard release. Kino has done a variety of actor and actress or star box sets where you can get a variety of films bundled together at a nice discount, like some of their Noir box sets, and those include now 3 volumes of Audie Muphy collections, so all 3 are here in the sale at $19.99 each, and they feature a variety of films, primarily I believe from Universal Masters, but some of them have really notable directors like Don Siegel in particular, so these are really fascinating bundles. You usually get 1 or 2 genre classics plus some other interesting titles, and all at a nice discount. We have the 1941 version of the classic story Backstreet on sale for only $7.49. That has both a new commentary and a new 2K master. The 1939 absolute classic Beau Geste is available here for only $9.99 on sale. The classic William Wellman directed Gary Cooper vehicle, one of the great action and adventure films, is here from a new 4K master with a new commentary. So this is another essential title where the Kino release is a brand new 4K master and the best technical presentation yet to date. We have their reissue of the classic Western, The Big Country, which also includes both original artwork and still has the slipcover. This is a reissue that does correct the aspect ratio problem of the first MGM Blu-ray that gave us this master. So basically, this is Kino using the old MGM master, actually fixing the bad aspect ratio problem, which had the entire image of the film stretched. So the whole film was distorted on the MGM Blu-ray. So that is fixed here. So this is the best technical presentation that we have. And there are some nice supplements, but unfortunately, if you want all of the supplements, you do have to track down the film's Laserdisc release, which does have some exclusive supplements. We have Hitchcock's classic masterpiece Blackmail for only $9.99 on Blu-ray. This includes both the sound and silent versions. Most people aren't aware that Blackmail actually exists in 2 separate versions, and both are critical to study for understanding Hitchcock. This does have some supplements, but unfortunately, there is an aspect ratio problem that Kino has never addressed, so unfortunately you do have to deal with a slight stretching distortion problem, but this is still the best technical presentation because no one else has stepped up to the plate and presented a restored version of Blackmail on Blu-ray, and there are still outstanding restorations of the British Hitchcock films that have not been released to disc, but at least we have a version of the Blackmail restoration, and it does include the silent version with supplements. It's just unfortunate that the aspect ratio problem was never addressed. The 1945 adventure sort of spy thriller Blood on the Sun is available for only $9.99. This is a James Cagney vehicle and also is a brand new 4K scan from Paramount, plus it includes a new commentary and the trailer, so it's very much worth your time. We also have the Universal restoration of the absolute classic gem by Candlelight. This is one of James Whale's non-horror films. It's very much Whale operating in, I mean, basically it feels like Ernst Lubitsch territory. It is a comedy of of the class society. It is very much about situational comedy that is adroit, and it is beautifully done. There's an effervescent quality to it, and this is a film that has been very hard to see in a good version for a long time. So this is a newer Universal restoration, just like The Kiss Before the Mirror, plus Kino did include a brand new commentary, so this is another of the must-own Kino titles because it's a Universal modern restoration of an absolute classic from the legendary James Whale, and a film that really needs to be rediscovered because it's an absolute delight. For fellow John Frankenheimer fans, there is the reissue of 1982's The Challenge. This is one of the Kino reissues they've been doing where they spiff up the bit rate and basically take what was on a single layer disc before, put it out again on a dual layer disc, and give you the encoding they should have done in the first place. So if you already have the first release, basically this has a higher bit rate, it includes a slipcover, and some, like this one, do include a new commentary. So if you have the past release, this is one of the ones that you have to double dip on just for basically having better encoding and having the new commentary and the slipcover if you like those. We have the 1940 Preston Sturges classic Christmas in July. This does have a nice commentary track, but otherwise it is a standard release of an older master. Then we have one of the iconic American International films with the various horror legends that is adjacent to the iconic Roger Corman Poe series, but this one in particular, The Comedy of Terrors from 1964, is, for my money, the hidden gem of all of AIP and possibly the best film they ever produced. This was the second sort of comedy that was written by Richard Matheson after The Raven in 1963, but this film is basically an original. It is a black comedy about a pair of men who run their own funeral parlor that's not doing very well, played by Vincent Price and Peter Lorre, bickering beautifully throughout. They're doing so poorly that they actually have to keep recycling the same coffin over and over again. And the film also stars both Basil Rathbone and Boris Karloff. But the film is a beautiful, macabre, black comedy that mixes elements of farce and horror so beautifully that it is a classic in its own right, but it also has a poignancy to it because it was very late in the careers of a lot of the people involved, and you can very much tell that this was one of the last films that Peter Lorre would make, and it was also one of the very late in the careers for Basil Rathbone and Boris Karloff as well. So there's a certain poignancy to this film, but it was also directed by the great Jacques Tourneur, who, although it was AIP and the budget was small, I think injected some of his own personal magic into the proceedings. And so for me, this is quite possibly the best film AIP ever made. It is a one-of-a-kind film that when you see it, it's very much an experience of, how did this ever get made? How did this magical little film ever get made? And where's it been all my life? But this is the same master that's been released several times by different labels. The main draw here is that it does include a new exclusive commentary. So if you're a commentary geek like me, you are tempted to purchase all of the Kino AIP Poe film adjacent reissues just because of the commentary. We have the Sam Peckinpah picture Convoy from 1978. This is a pretty stuffed Blu-ray with audio commentary and extensive documentary and supplemental features that continue from there. Convoy is an interesting film. It's also a film with a convoluted production history because it was later in Peckinpah's career, and let's just say he wasn't doing the best at the time. So there's differing reports that other people, such as James Coburn, actually wound up directing portions of the film. But it's an interesting experience and important for Peckinpah's career. So this is a must for Peckinpah fans. And it's got a substantial extras package, and this is the best release of the film to date. So this is definitely one that you should pick up if you are a Peckinpah fan. Next is 1933's Counselor at Law with the legendary John Barrymore. This was directed by William Wyler and is a brand new 2K master with a new commentary and trailer and all of that in the same release for only $9.99 makes it an absolute must. We have the updated edition of Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid, one of the absolute classic Steve Martin films directed by Carl Reiner, which is an absolute love letter to the classical noir period and famously intercuts the footage of Steve Martin in with clips of classic noir films, and beautifully so. It's a masterclass of editing, but this does have the spiffed up technical presentation. It's the same Universal master from past releases, but it does add a new exclusive commentary track. And then we have the Kino release of Death on the Nile, which again is a master that is newer and does add some nice extras and is the best release of the classic version of Agatha Christie's story and easily the best filmed version of the story. Of course, this was made after the success of the 1974 version of Murder on the Orient Express. Then there's the special edition reissue of the classic Italian Western Death Rides a Horse. This is basically a spiffed up encoding of the past release as far as I know, and it does include a slipcover now. This is the MGM master, so it is the best that we've ever gotten, and is far better than the horrible public domain versions you'll find. So it is an older master with some damage, and I have reviewed the first disc release on this channel, so basically this version is just going to be a spiffed up reissue, so basically slightly better bitrate and slipcover, and if you're like me and you bought the first version, you kind of just have to buy yet another version because they couldn't be bothered to do it right the first time. Next is the 1934 classic Death Takes a Holiday with Frederick March, directed by the great Mitchell Leisen. This is a very fun film that's basically dealing in the sort of genre that you could term sort of heavenly intervention, except this time it's not so heavenly because the Grim Reaper gets involved. So this is very much in the same sort of realm, I would say, as films like The Devil and Daniel Webster, and this has a nice commentary plus trailer and is only $7.99. Next is a $7.99 silent film, which is actually a 4K restoration by Universal. So this is of The Delicious Little Devil, which is actually co-starring Rudolph Valentino. It's a film I've never actually gotten to see, but this looks fascinating, and it's another one of these amazing Universal 4K restorations of a silent film. Plus it has a little bit of supplements, so at only $7.99, this is an absolute must. Next is the classic detective story directed by William Wyler, a very early standout film for Kirk Douglas. It's a fantastic cast, incredible performances, and this is one of the essential cop dramas, really. This is a newer Paramount scan, so it's a new master, plus it has some supplements, and it's only $9.99. Then we have Devil in the Deep, which is a newer Universal restoration. This is a vehicle for Tallulah Bankhead, Gary Cooper, and Charles Lawton, but it's also a very early film for Cary Grant, so it's a must for Grant fans. Then we have another disc I reviewed on this channel, the release of The Devil Bat, which is possibly the best of the Poverty Row horror films that Bela Lugosi made. It's an absolute delight, and it's a film that's been stuck in video hell. This has a nice commentary, and it is by far the best quality I've ever seen for this film. But it is a Poverty Row horror, so do keep in mind that the elements are limited, so you are going to see some significant wear, but it is far higher in quality than any other version that exists. And if you love Bela Lugosi as you should, and you've never seen The Devil Bat, this is one of those life-changing films. Again, I think this is probably the best of all the Poverty Row horror films that he made, and it is an absolute delight. Then in another disc that I have reviewed on this channel, we have the absolutely immortal science fiction and science fiction horror classic Dr. Cyclops from the unbelievably legendary and imaginative team that brought us King Kong and many other classics, Ernst Schoedsack and Marion C. Cooper. This is a brilliant and extraordinarily influential film that's also very much a breakthrough, just as King Kong was, in terms of depicting effects of people shrunken down to miniature size by an evil scientist deep in the jungle. This is also photographed in beautiful color, and this is rendered extraordinarily well by the 4K preservation master that Kino has released on Blu-ray, loaded with supplemental features features, especially in a standout commentary. But while this is a new 4K restoration, it isn't 100% pristine, but still it is light years ahead of the older versions and is a real stunner of a color film transfer, particularly for the opening sequences, which lets you know right off the bat that you're in for an interesting visual treat, as this is not your typical run-of-the-mill film, but also is one of those where Cooper and Schoedsack were really pushing the boundaries of commercial cinema even at that time in the early 1940s. So if you ever wondered what they did outside of King Kong and The Most Dangerous Game after their more documentary-oriented features, Dr. Cyclops is actually one of the films that gets frequently overlooked, and I do think this Kino release, especially combined with the 4K master and the great commentary and supplements, is definitely one of the standout Kino Blu-ray releases. We have the special edition release of Evil Under the Sun, which is the sort of final of the EMI Agatha Christie adaptation starring Peter Ustinov as Poirot. This was basically the last film of the string of Christie films that started with the 1974 Sidney Lumet version of Murder on the Orient Express. This is still a wonderfully charming film. It is a newer master with supplements, but for some particular reason, this is actually not as good in terms of the master and the encoding as what turned up on the Studio Canal release in Europe. So with the Christie films, you kind of have to do some research and try to figure out which release uses which master and has what extras and what encoding and such. But basically, you'll want to pick up all the Kino releases, except Evil Under the Sun. You might get the Studio Canal version, or perhaps get both if you want both masters and all the different supplements. Then we have the new UHD of Stanley Kubrick's Fear and Desire, his first feature film, which famously he tried to suppress for many decades, and this is the new Library of Congress restoration that restores the so-called premiere version, which puts back about 9 minutes of material that is priceless, that was thought lost all this time. So this is really a treasure, and getting it on a UHD as well, along with the early works of Kubrick in terms of the short films, also in HD. It does have a new commentary, but unfortunately the problem here is the all-important premiere version has been encoded so poorly that it is basically macro blocking city throughout, plus the HDR is far too bright. This is a disc that I'm currently in the process of reviewing on this channel. It's definitely a title that you do need to pick up as a Kubrick fan because it is a priceless treasure, but unfortunately Kino has completely botched this release, and I think the encoding is just about the worst encoding on a UHD I've ever seen. Ironically though, the shorter, more common theatrical version that all the past releases have used seems to be encoded decently, so it doesn't have the issues that the all-important premiere version does. So that's just mind-boggling. But yeah, this is definitely an unbelievably important title. No one else has released this yet that we know of, or has been announced in terms of plans. So it is very important, but I would advise pick this up on sale, but don't pay full price for this, and also prepare yourself because the encoding is god-awful, and that problem does actually affect some of the short films, unfortunately. We do have 2 of the film noir collections at a nice discount for $24.99, each giving you 3 films. Then we have the UHD and Blu-ray combo release of A Fistful of Dollars, which I have extensively reviewed on this channel. Unfortunately, 2 of the Dollars trilogy UHD releases Kino have done are not at the same level as their release of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which is the only one of the 3 that they really tried to get right. Fistful does at least try to fix some of the color problems of the terrible Richard Vada master, but there are still some there, unfortunately. It is a bit cropped in comparison to the older 2007 Italian restoration master, and it does have the horrible restoration mono track, which has totally wrong music and effects levels, and frequently has dialogue and effects be drowned out or missing entirely due to the music being too loud, and whoever did the restoration track didn't bother that they got the level of the stems correct. So unfortunately, the restoration mono is actually defective. That's the restoration side of things. So it's actually the restoration track is not correct, and that does further mar this release. Otherwise, it is technically the best in quality presentation and on a technical level in terms of the image master, and it does retain all of the old MGM legacy supplements, but it's unfortunately a bit of a mixed bag, and the UHD is SDR only, as are all the Dollar Trilogy UHDs. So I did go into full detail and did a full breakdown in my review, which you can watch if you haven't already, if you're curious to know more about this. But they are still important releases, so it's nice that they're included in the sale, so you can get them at a nice discount. But keep in mind, the only one that is actually as good as it should be is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So of course, next is the UHD and Blu-ray combo release for a few dollars more. This one fares better in that the master was not color timed by Rich Rivada, they merely did the scan work. It is the best technical quality in terms of image that we've ever had for the film on home video. However, it does have some baked-in damage and issues and things, so that's not good. And while Kino did advertise that they put back all of the missing footage that a German team previously did on a past German Blu-ray release, unfortunately, that's not true either. It's still missing a few seconds of footage because they somehow didn't put that back when they put everything else back in the film. And also, it uses a hideously noise-reduced version of the original mono mix in terms of the English mono coming from MGM. So the audio is quite poor, but that's due to how MGM handled it. And also the long-standing audio sync issues still exist. It does seem like Kino tried to address that some, so it is far better than how bad it was on the MGM releases, but it's still not quite there. And that, combined with the fact that there's some baked-in damage, it's an SDR only UHD, and that not all of the footage is reinstated into the film, does hold this release back from what it could be. But again, it is an essential release. It is the best technical quality that we've had for the film, but keep in mind, if you want to have the best possible presentation of the film, you'll have to do some work on your own. And then we have the UHD of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Again, this is the one of the Dollar Trilogy that is properly done. It did use fan efforts and materials to reconstruct the international 1967 release version, which I do think is actually the superior edit of the film. It does include the Italian scenes as a bonus feature on the disc itself. It is, again, SDR only, and it does include the fan-provided Laserdisc mono for the English mono track. So you have the Rich Rivada master, color graded to try and remove and tame down as much of the terrible Rich Rivada color as humanly possible. You have fan efforts and materials utilized to perfectly recreate the 1967 international release cut, synced to the fan capture of the MGM Laserdisc mono. So you have the best picture and sound possible for the film, short of having a brand new from the ground up 4K master without any Rich Rivada problems at all. So this is, I think, the most essential Kino disc of them all. This is the best release they've ever done. It is the release they put the most effort into, and I think that was really to make up for the debacle of their 2017 first Blu-ray release of the film, which was a hot mess of problems. So if you were to get any of their UHDs first, it should be this one. And this is the only one of their Leone releases that I can actually wholeheartedly recommend. Next is their reissue of Leone's masterpiece Duck-You-Sucker, which unfortunately they put the Fistful of Dynamite reissue title back on the film, which had finally gotten reversed in 2007 by MGM and put back the correct Duck-You-Sucker title on. Unfortunately, they announced they were going to do a UHD release, but canceled that when they found out they would have to actually fully restore the film, which has had nothing but release problems over its entire history, and it's really cursed in terms of preservation status. There is no good version of this film available, and this is a reissue Blu-ray of their first version, which is just using the MGM master, which is full of errors, including censored dialogue and incorrect music cues throughout, but also is cropped and has deficient color timing and is an older master, and the previous Kino release was not very well encoded, and it ported over the MGM Legacy supplements, so this at least should be a little bit better encoded, I think, and it now has a slipcover, but keep in mind this is just a Kino reissue of their old disc of the old, screwy, problematic, not good MGM master, and it does not include the original audio track either. Next, we have the essential early Billy Wilder film, Five Grapes to Cairo, from a new 4K master, and includes a nice Joseph McBride commentary. This is the best release of the film. It is a newer master compared to the Region B Eureka Blu-ray. We also have another Wilder masterpiece in the Fortune Cookie. This is a special edition, but it is the same pre-existing MGM HD master, but spiffed up with a new audio commentary plus legacy extras, making it the best overall release of the film to date. Next, we have the classic Gary Cooper vehicle with Madeleine Carroll, The General Died at Dawn, for 1936. This also is from a brand new 4K master with new exclusive audio commentary and the film's original trailer. 1935's The Good Fairy was written by Preston Sturges and directed by William Wyler, so you get two gigantic names right there, plus a fantastic cast, and a brand new 4K master with new audio commentary, so this is another essential title. One of the Preston Sturges masterpieces, The Great McGinty, is here from a brand new 4K restoration with new audio commentary. This is another absolutely essential Kino title because all Sturges films are worth their weight in gold, and this one is only $7.99. We have the 4K UHD release of the classic John Sturges-directed Gunfight at the OK Corral, which is a UHD and Blu-ray combo format release of a new Paramount scan with a new commentary and, of course, both the original audio and a 5.1 remix. I haven't got to look at this yet myself, so this will be a title I'm picking up as well, and I know there's already been plenty of transfer discussion in regards to the color timing. Then for only $7.99 in one of the absolute essential titles in this sale, and one that I've reviewed on this channel, is actually a double feature release of two early and very obscure Douglas Fairbanks Sr. classics in both The Good Bad Man, which is an early Western that's actually quite good, even though it only survives in a cut-down version, and then what I think is the silent masterpiece, The Half-Breed, which is decades ahead of its time in telling a remarkable story. That's also a silent film with some Western themes, obviously, but a silent film that's actually trying to be a drama about racism and doing so in a progressive manner in the silent era, decades ahead of other films tackling similar subject matter. And also, it only survived in a cut-down version and in very poor quality, and was the subject of an incredible restoration that does manage to do a Herculean effort of restoring the film more towards its original complete version and runtime. And both films are exquisitely restored in terms of the surviving elements, and it is an absolute must-own Blu-ray release because, again, I do think The Half-Breed is, simply put, one of the best silent films I've ever seen. And at only $7.99 for a double feature of early Douglas Fairbanks classics, one of which I think is one of the great silent films. Both are very much worth your time, and there are some really nice supplements on this release as well. Then we have the special edition Blu-ray only release of The Hallelujah Trail, which is the John Sturges Western epic that's also more of having a comedy tinge, but this was an ultra-large roadshow film that's had nothing but really crummy releases in the past. So while unfortunately this film has never been given a full-on restoration that it deserves as one of the Ultra Panavision 70 titles, of course, it did at least finally get a new 2K scan of the inner positive for this Blu-ray release, plus a new commentary. So this is the only release of the film on a technical standard that is really up to par. The previous Blu-ray from Olive is one of the worst Blu-rays ever made. It was basically so bad it looked just like an upscale of an old MGM standard def master. It was atrociously bad. So this is at least an upgrade over that, and keep in mind this is the only new or modern master the film has, but also keep in mind the images you're seeing on this Blu-ray release are only a fraction of the quality of the original release in large format. So the film still needs to be properly restored by MGM, but at the very least we have this sort of, I guess, basic preservation version in terms of this 2K scan of a 35mm reduction inner positive. Then we have a Blu-ray of Hell is for Heroes, which is the Don Siegel-directed World War II picture starring Steve McQueen. This was given a brand new 4K scan and, of course, has a new commentary plus the trailer. Then we have the new UHD release of the new 4K master of High Noon, one of the most iconic westerns ever made. This is a Blu-ray combo release with new audio commentary commentaries, and of course, most of the previous legacy extras from past DVD releases. This is another of the releases I'm really looking forward to checking out in this sale, and it is another technical upgrade for one of the most iconic westerns ever made. Then there's the UHD of High Plains Drifter, which also includes a Blu-ray option. However, the issue with this release, while it's an upgrade of the past Kino Blu-ray release of the film of a newer master to begin with, unfortunately Kino decided having the original mono track was not important for this release. In fact, they flat out refused to have 3 options in terms of the audio, even though there was plenty of room on this release. So this release has a 5.1 remix and a stereo remix, but does not offer the film's original mono mix, which for me makes this release absolutely useless. A film should have its original audio track, and there's no reason to not include it when you obviously have the track and have the space on the disc, and there's nothing wrong with having 3 audio tracks. Then there's the Blu-ray release of High, Wide, and Handsome, which is an Irene Dunne vehicle co-starring Randolph Scott, but directed by the great Ruben Mamoulian. This is also the product of a brand new Universal 4K scan, and so it's a brand new master, and it has a new audio commentary plus the original trailer, and is marked down to only $8.99. Next, we have the 1952 Western Horizons West, directed by the legendary Bud Boetticher. Anything Boetticher ever did is fascinating, but in particular, as one of the great Western directors of all time, all of his Westerns are essential, even if they're lesser known. This does have a new commentary and a trailer, and again, any Boetticher Western is essential. Then we have Hot Saturday, which is a very early Cary Grant vehicle, which interestingly pairs him with his longtime friend and roommate Randolph Scott. This does have a nice commentary, but seems to be an older master. Then we have what is probably the best Blu-ray Kino has ever released in terms of overall quality and presentation and film across the board, and that is the release of the restoration of the 1923 silent masterpiece, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, starring Lon Chaney Sr. I have reviewed this release on this channel. It does have a really nice commentary and some really incredible extras. The presentation is first-rate, and Universal's restoration is amazing. I have also reviewed the Eureka Region B Masters of Cinema release, which I do think is a little bit better in terms of overall presentation and has more supplements and more fantastical artwork, but the Kino release does have some really fantastic exclusive extras and, of course, the same incredible restoration. So at only $9.99, they're practically giving it away, and if you were to have any single Kino Blu-ray release, it should be their release of The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Again, I think overall, in terms of Blu-ray releases, this is the best overall presentation and disc release on a technical level and supplements and value for money that they've ever released. Then we have the UHD release of In the Heat of the Night, which is the new MGM 4K master with the MGM legacy supplements of this absolute classic, but you do have to have the Criterion release for the Criterion supplements. The second disc actually gives you both of the Sidney Poitier starring follow-ups to this film, of course, in just 1080p HD, so if you didn't pick up past Kino releases of those, you actually get both of those films bundled in with this release. So you're actually getting 3 for the price of 1. Then we also have Sidney Pollack's last film, The Interpreter, which is quite fascinating and a film that needs rediscovery. But unfortunately, while this does have some nice supplements, it does have some transfer issues that do mar the overall experience. So this is one of the titles I definitely do not recommend. You will need to either stick with your old DVD or import versions from Europe, which do not have technical problems and are far superior. We have the Billy Wilder classic Irma la Douce, which is here in a newer 4K master presentation. But I do vastly prefer the Eureka Masters of Cinema version and would advise you to go for that release. As I mentioned before, Kino's release of the James Whale masterful The Kiss Before the Mirror from a new Universal restoration is here. This does have a nice exclusive commentary and is again from a beautiful Universal restoration. This has been a film that was extraordinarily hard to see and existed only in terrible quality versions for the most part. So this is a fantastic fantastic must-see restoration, but Indicator in the UK has done a version of this same master and has a phenomenal commentary and more extras, so I would recommend getting the Indicator release over the Kino, but again, the Kino is the same new restoration master and does have an exclusive commentary of its own, so you can choose to get both, but if you were to only get one, I would advise going for the Indicator version, which I do think is superior. Next is the release of Billy Wilder's The Lost Weekend, which of course is one of Wilder's most famous masterpieces, with the Oscar-winning turn by Ray Milland. This is a new 4K master. It is the best technical presentation of the film with an exclusive commentary, so this does vault ahead over all past releases and is the best presentation from a visual standpoint, so this will be the Blu-ray you'll want to pick up over the others. We do have the UHD release of the iconic Mad Max here, which does have the new 4K master and is better than the version Warner has in their Mad Max box sets, and it does include all of the MGM Legacy supplements plus a Blu-ray copy of the film. However, the original Australian mono mix, it does not have the extra line that's only found in the MGM DVD version, and the whole history of the mono mix is a bit clouded, and there's apparently multiple different mono mixes, but at least this is a nicer presentation of the film with better color timing than what existed before, but one still gets the feeling that it could be a little bit better, but at least it is a solid upgrade over the old Blu-ray, but do keep in mind the original Australian mono could be better, and this is another title that I'm going to do a full review of on this channel. Next is 1953's The Mississippi Gambler, which is a Tyrone Power vehicle, but the reason why I wanted to highlight it, this is a new 2K master with new commentary. This is a film I've never gotten to see, but it's always been on my watch list, and again, anytime I see a sale title with commentary, and especially with a new master, that's what draws me in. Next is the classic Mystery of Edwin Drood, which is actually a Dickens adaptation starring Claude Rains, made by Universal, but it very much is part of the Universal horror canon, and I have reviewed this particular release on this channel. This has been a film that was really VHS exclusive for a long time and did not have the greatest master in the world. This is a new scan and Universal restoration master, but the element they had lots of wear, so there is quite a lot of damage in this transfer. But do keep in mind this film has been quite rare to see in decent versions, and it's a film all of us Universal horror geeks always hoped would get a proper fancy release, a newer master, and just never thought it would. But it's a really striking film, and it is part of the Universal horror canon. And this does have a really fantastic commentary track as well, so it's very much worth your time and also essential for Claude Rains fans. We have the UHD release of the masterpiece The Night of the Hunter, which is the technical best presentation of the film to date in terms of picture, but it does not have the essential extras of the Criterion Blu-ray release, so you'll have to have that. But of course, if you want the best audio presentation of the film, you actually need to have MGM's old opened up 1.33 ratio version of the film on DVD from the UCLA restoration. That lossy mono track on the DVD, it does not have any major noise reduction, and as far as I know, is the best audio presentation of the film to date. So technically, if you want everything for the film, you need the Kino UHD, the Criterion Blu-ray, and the old MGM DVD. Next is the classic Western Night Passage from 1957, starring Jimmy Stewart. This was the film he made just after breaking his partnership with Anthony Mann on the iconic Westerns they made. This was originally to have been another one of those. You can get a little bit of the feeling of that still being there, but it also quickly deviates from that. So it's, I would say it's an average to above average Western because of that slight man flavor and having Jimmy Stewart, but also it was early on for Technorama. So this is a beautifully photographed ultra wide film, and this Kino Blu-ray is finally giving it a newer transfer. So it is a spiffed up presentation and it is included in the sale. It could be a bit better, but if it had been a more hands-off transfer by Universal, but it is solid and a big upgrade over the old DVD presentation. Of course, the Kino Blu-ray of Nosferatu is included, but whatever you do, don't ever buy this or watch this because there is such a massive frame rate problem that it throws away a significant portion of the film because it drops frames every couple of frames. So this is still probably the worst Kino disc that exists because you lose 20 to 30% of the film. So the same restoration is on the Eureka Masters of Cinema Blu-ray release, and that release is perfect, so please import that version instead, or pick up the BFI Blu-ray release of the alternative photoplate restoration. So I have reviewed both of those releases on this channel, so you can look at those reviews if you want to know more, but just keep in mind, avoid the Kino Blu-ray at all costs. Next is 1934's Now and Forever with Gary Cooper, Carol Lombard, and Shirley Temple. This was directed by Henry Hathaway, and this Blu-ray includes a new 2K master and audio commentary plus the trailer, and it's only $7.99. So it's essential for fans of all three major stars, but it's also a Kino title marked down that even less that has a new master and commentary. The Kino release of the 1920 silent classic Outside the Law is here from the Universal fantastic modern restoration. This does have an exclusive commentary, and I did review the Eureka Masters of Cinema version on this channel, but basically everything I reviewed on that release applies to this release in terms of the transfer and the Universal restoration, which is first rate. This is a classic starring Lon Chaney, and of course was directed by Todd Browning, so it's an early collaboration for them. And while it's not an out-and-out horror film, you can start to read a few flourishes in there that are similar to the more famous Browning and Chaney films. And it's also an extremely well-made, quite gritty in places, character drama that's actually a gangster film. And I think it's a fantastic silent film and an incredible restoration that is dirt cheap here in the sale, plus the Kino version has an exclusive commentary track. We have the special edition of The President's Analyst, which is an absolute classic, one of the most underrated cult films that you've never seen, that's incredible, and one of those films where you ask, how in the hell did this ever get made? This includes a brand new commentary. It's a brand new Paramount master, so this is a brand new transfer, has a brand new commentary, plus pre-existing materials and a second audio commentary, so you're getting two commentaries for the price of one. This is another absolutely essential title, and one of those films I champion like crazy because I felt like I joined a secret club when I saw this film for the first time that I had never heard of, and it's like, where has this been all of my life? Essentially, imagine if you crossed James Coburn in his iconic Flint films with Dr. Strangelove and the Parallax View, and you start to get the idea of how one-of-a-kind this film is. We also have the UHD of Ronin, which, of course, anybody who knows me knows is one of my cinematic obsessions, and I think one of the greatest films ever made, and possibly the best film of the 90s, and arguably John Frankenheimer's masterpiece. I think it is severely underrated, and it's had its share of video issues over the years. So the Kino UHD is the best technical presentation to date in terms of resolution, and it Dolby Vision HDR, plus it ports over all the legacy supplements. However, I do have a few quibbles with it, and I am going to do a full intensive review of the title as a standalone, but it is at least an upgrade over the past MGM Blu-ray if you didn't get the Arrow Blu-ray, which was also from a 4K scan and master. Arrow did their own transfer, and that was cinematographer approved and did their own extras. So this is another quasi-upgrade, if you will, but I do have reservations about some of the HDR and audio and encoding, so it's not as good as it could be, let's put it that way. And it's another modern MGM 4K master that does unfortunately have print damage and wear throughout, which is another disquieting element. So it's on sale here, and it's always best to pick up the Kino UHDs while they're on sale, but do keep in mind this is not a perfect release either. Next is a film I've never gotten to see, but I've really wanted to, which is 1934's Search for Beauty with Buster Crabbe and Ida Lupino. And this has a brand new 2K master and new audio commentary as well for this particular release. But essentially, this is a sort of hybrid of genres. It's basically a sort of sports film at first, because you have our two leads who are sports figures who were brought in to run a health and beauty magazine, and it's actually run by nefarious con artists. So it's sort of straddling genres, but it sounds like an interesting mix, and I've always been meaning to see it. But the Kino Blu-ray is the best presentation to date because it has a brand new master and commentary to sweeten the deal. Next, we have a new special edition of the classic Secret Beyond the Door, directed by the master Fritz Lang from 1947, in his string of noir classics that are now being given brand new scans. This received a new 4K scan from Paramount with a new Alan K. Rhodey commentary, and it does include a slipcover if you're a slipcover fan. Anything Fritz Lang ever did is worth your time, to put it mildly. But his noir classics are, I think, actually quite underrated outside of the more famous ones. And of course, Scarlet Street recently got a Kino UHD, so at least Secret Beyond the Door has gotten a new release from a new 4K master, but one would have hoped that this would have gotten the UHD treatment as well, since it's a 4K master, but unfortunately it didn't. But it's here in the sale and is a must purchase. We have the UHD release of the classic Serpico, directed by Sidney Lumet. This is a newer 4K master, so it doesn't seem to have the egregious color problems of the previous European Studio Canal version, but I've just not gotten to look at this disc yet, so I don't know about the audio presentation either or the disc encoding. But again, it's always best to pick up Kino UHDs when they're on sale at a significant savings like this, and all of Lumet's films are absolute classics. We have the Kino release of the Universal classic The Strange Door. This is from the tail end of the classic horror period as they were transitioning into science fiction, and is a Robert Louis Stevenson adaptation, actually. Now, Eureka has released the same master in one of their classic horror sets, which I have reviewed on this channel, so you can hear my thoughts on the film. But the Kino release does include exclusive commentaries, so this is one that you will have to double dip for, but I do think the Eureka horror sets of the Universal horror films are spiffier than the Kino and Shout Factory American releases. But if you want all the commentaries and extras, you do have to double dip on the US releases. Then we've got the Kino release of the noir classic The Strange Love of Martha Ivers, which I have reviewed on this channel. This is a new Paramount restoration, or I should say preservation scan, because it's not really fully restored. There is significant damage and wear throughout still, but it is by far the best quality we've had for the film, and does have a really fantastic commentary track. Unfortunately, it doesn't have all of the extras of the Australian imprint release that did have this same master. So, as I've talked about in my review, if you want all of the supplements, you do have to get the imprint version. But otherwise, this is another essential Kino release of a noir classic that has finally been spiffed up some, and it's the best technical presentation to date, just unfortunately not meticulously restored or a UHD release. Then we have the interesting pre-code horror film by the Halperin brothers, Supernatural, starring Carole Lombard and Randolph Scott. I have reviewed this Blu-ray on this channel. It's a really interesting and striking film that you should see. It's the film they made after White Zombie. So if you ever wondered what the guys behind White Zombie would do if they had studio money behind them and made another sort of horror film, that's Supernatural, and it's a really out of character sort of role for Carole Lombard. So it's essentially a film that turns into a horror film about a woman being possessed possibly by the vengeful spirit of a murderess. But unfortunately, while this is a nice new master in terms of the visuals and does have some extras, the audio is significantly noise reduced and over-processed. So you will actually notice that. I think you can actually hear it, and I did talk about that in my review, and I've done further research since then. So this is a title I would recommend getting while it's on sale. sale because it's a fantastic and fascinating film for all the different facets I mentioned. But do keep in mind the audio is very deficient because it's been over-processed like crazy. If you do want better audio, it does exist, but you have to track down the hard-to-find mid-1990s VHS release from Universal, which I did. So that's actually how you source a better audio track for this pre-code horror classic. We have the Kino reissue of the 1968 original classic version of the Thomas Crown Affair, directed by Norman Jewison, a classic of the era. This is the best technical presentation, as it's the newer MGM master, plus has the legacy supplements, but unfortunately the original mono track is quite overprocessed, and if you want the best mono presentation of the film, of the original audio, you do have to go back to the first letterbox Laserdisc pressing with its PCM mono track. So basically you want the MGM Laserdisc from the early 1990s. Then we have the Anthony Mann and James Stewart classic Thunder Bay, which is one of the non-westerns they made in their partnership together. And while it's more of a standard genre film, I think there's enough of the flavor and psychological complexities they had in their westerns to make this film unique and interesting. And it's also one of the very early films at the dawn of widescreen. So this is really a film that should be Academy ratio and was shown widescreen in theaters, matted, which isn't really the way to see this. And also it did have a multi-channel stereo presentation. So it did have a 3-channel left, center, right stereo presentation in addition to just plain mono. Past DVD releases did reflect this, and some DVDs have had the proper Academy ratio version. Unfortunately, while this release does have both the mono and the 3-channel stereo mix available, which is fantastic, and those tracks need to be preserved, unfortunately, this doesn't have the original ratio. This is in 1:8:5, so this is actually the cropped theatrical presentation instead of the proper Academy ratio version. The film is still perfectly watchable, and it's far better than how it looked on DVD, but it would have been better if we had the actual composed ratio. And when you compare it to the various DVDs, pretty much, and Region 2 as PAL DVDs or VHS copies that were in Academy, you can tell the difference in composition right off the bat. So this is a title where you should at least have both ratios, but really you should have Academy ratio instead. Then we have the Kino reissue of the classic Tomb of Ligeia, which was the last of the Roger Corman AIP Edgar Allan Poe series starring Vincent Price. And this was the second film that was shot in England. So it's one of the most character-driven of the films, and it's a classic in its own right. This reissue does add a new commentary, but otherwise it's the same master as past releases. We have the Kino UHD of Touch of Evil from the new 4K presentation with a unique exclusive commentary, but I do think the Eureka Masters of Cinema UHD presentation is the better presentation overall by a substantial margin, so I would only advise going for the Kino UHD if you want the wonderful commentary track. Then we have the UHD upgrade of the John Frankenheimer masterpiece, The Train, which also includes a bundled Blu-ray plus all of the legacy supplements. But if you want the film's best original mono track, you do need to actually track down the Laserdisc, which is the best mono by far. Then we have the release of The Trap, the classic Lon Chaney Sr. starring silent film recently restored by Universal that I have reviewed on this channel. This is a phenomenal restoration. I think the film is an underrated classic and, of course, essential because of Chaney, but I really enjoyed this film, and it does have some good supplements, and I think it's just another phenomenal silent release and perfectly done by Kino on the disc release, and it's only $7.99, so they're giving it away. This did win several of my Disc of the Year awards and was nominated for even more, so this is another one of the absolute must purchases in this sale, and it is being given away at only $7.99, so this is just an absolute must. Next is 1952's The Turning Point, directed by William Dieterle, starring William Holden. This is been on my watch list, but it is a new 4K scan by Paramount with commentary and trailer. So this is another one of the films I've always been wanting to see, but at least now has a spiffier presentation from a new master and a 4K scan at that. Then we have the spiffed up special edition of Two Mules for Sister Sarah, directed by Don Siegel from a Bud Bedecker script, starring Clint Eastwood and Shirley MacLaine with an Ennio Morricone score. This has the 2 different cuts of the film, plus new commentary and legacy extras, and it's really important because the past Blu-ray had just tons of overprocessing and was one of the worst looking of the main Clint Eastwood films on Blu-ray, had a lot of digital noise reduction and such. So this is one of the most important of the Eastwood film reissues Kino has done from newer masters, but I've held off on getting the rest of them because they've been doing UHD reissues one at a time. So I kind of got the feeling that if I bought a lot of the Eastwood reissues, I would have to rebuy them again on UHD, and some are merely just upgrades of the Universal Blu-rays and use the same master, so not all of them are new masters, but if you were to get any of them, Two Mules for Sister Sarah is probably the most important and has the most material on it. Another essential Kino release is the release of Hitchcock's Under Capricorn, which is one of his most underrated, little discussed films, and probably one of the most difficult watches in the Hitchcock canon because it's very atypical of Hitchcock. It's very much a costume drama. It is an Ingrid Bergman vehicle, and it was cursed with tons of bad versions because it's also Technicolor, and it was shot in the same single take process as Rope was, but the elements were not maintained very well. So the only release before this that was any good was the old DVD from Image, and that had a lot of wear and color issues and damage. So this was the product of a new 4K restoration and is a huge improvement over the old DVD and a must if you call yourself a Hitchcock fan. Even if you don't like this film all that much, you really should look at this new restoration because it does help the film play better. And there are some nice extras included in addition to a lovely new commentary. So at $9.99, this is another of the absolute must purchases of the Kino sale. It's another of the must own Kino disc because it's a underrated Hitchcock title after being given a 4K restoration. We have the Kino Lorber Blu-ray of Vera Cruz, which I have reviewed on this channel. This is the best technical presentation of the film to date. It does have some nice supplements, even though the audio presentation isn't quite as good as the old Laserdisc release. This is still a must-own because it is far better than the old out-of-print MGM Blu-ray, and this is one of the greatest Westerns of all time. I think it's one of the most important Westerns because of its influence on everything that came afterwards. This is hugely influential on both Sergio Leone and Sam Peckinpah. You can feel that when you see this film for the first time because so much is echoed in some of their famous films. Particularly Sergio Leone adored this film and referenced it many times, especially in For a Few Dollars More and Once Upon a Time in the West in particular. So I also think in a lot of ways this is, in terms of its tone, the first Italian Western, in terms of it being ridiculously gritty and having amoral characters who are your actual heroes, and was shot on location in Mexico famously in the Super Scope process, and directed by Robert Aldrich, gives it such a charged energy that makes it, I think, one of the masterful, iconic Westerns. We have the reissue of the Billy Wilder classic version of Witness for the Prosecution. This is another of the reissues where they've given it a slipcover and a spiffed up encoding. If you've got the previous Blu-ray, you will have to upgrade to this. Or if you've gone for the Eureka Masters of Cinema version, that one was better than the previous Kino Blu-ray, but this is just a upgrade for encode and slipcover over the first version. Then we have 1938's You and Me, starring George Raft and Sylvia Sidney, directed by the master Fritz Lang. This is earlier for Lang in his Hollywood career after his blistering classic Fury and just before the more notable and more famous noir classics that people know his American films for. But this is a newer 2K master with new commentary, and it's a newer Kino release from 2023, so it's great that this is included in the sale, and it's another must-buy. So that does it for my overview of titles to pick up or avoid in this sale. as usual, you do have to go through with a fine-tooth comb and look for titles that are new masters or have supplements, or hopefully have both new masters and supplements. But also you have to keep in mind which ones are just these newer reissues that are upgrading past bare bones single layer releases. So they're basically do-overs, and titles that have better releases by other labels or some of the UK and European labels. So you always have to keep in mind which release is actually better and which one has a newer master, and you might have to take a lot of notes and cross-reference and stuff, but it is helpful because you do have to try and keep track of which Kino releases are worth your money and worth picking up, and which ones are outdone by other releases, or which ones have technical problems. So again, you do have to sift through, you do have to do a bit of detective work, but the site sales are the best time to stock up on titles because the savings are quite substantial, and you do get free shipping if you buy over $50 worth. So this is the best time to stock up on titles, especially box sets and the UHD releases. But again, since Kino's business model is very much quantity over quality, you do have to sift through and figure out what you're going to spend your hard-earned money on and try to make your dollar go as far as it can, and get the releases that are better made or more substantial or have newer masters or have more extras than the ones that don't or have technical problems. So as always, I hope my babblings about films and physical media releases has been at least somewhat fun and informative. I do encourage people to check out the Kino site sale. Kino licenses more titles than anyone, and chances are they have plenty of titles in this sale that you've been meaning to pick up or maybe interested in. But again, do keep in mind it helps to do some detective work in terms of trying to figure out which releases you're going to go for. But the sales are the best time to pick up Kino releases for sure. So as always, please do keep supporting both studios and boutique labels by buying films on disc in order to help keep both physical media and film culture alive. And as always, thank you ever so much for watching.